So, croeso to Wrexham News. So we'll start with some introductions. I'm Carrie Harper. I represent Plaid Cymru in awarding Cllr Park.
And I'm Marc Jones. I'm the councillor, Plaid Cymru councillor for Grosvenor Award in Wrexham.
And I'm Kieran Thomas, so I'm chair of Yes Wrexham, Yes Cymru's branch in Wrexham.
I'm going to start this podcast off with a question. For everybody watching this or listening to this, do you think that profits generated from Welsh land or the Welsh seabed should benefit communities here in Wales? Not a trick question.
Bit of a no-brainer.
It's a bit of a no-brainer, but I'm assuming a lot of people won't know that actually the situation at the moment is that profits generated from those resources are actually extracted out and they go to fund the royal family and the UK Treasury.
And worse than that, some councils in Wales have to pay for the privilege of accessing their own beaches, their own foreshore. In Gwynedd, it's £161,000 they were expected to pay last year, and other councils have the same kind of costs facing them. So it's a double whammy for a lot of councils at a time when money is really tight.
I suppose we should explain what the Crown Estate actually is. So the Crown Estate is a company. It's owned by King Charles and it owns £603 million worth of Welsh land and also 65% of the seabed around the Welsh coastline as well. So it's a really significant resource. And unfortunately, it's yet another example, isn't it, of how Welsh resources are extracted out of Wales. So we've seen it with coal, with water, and now we're seeing it with renewables because a lot of this land is leased to companies doing renewable energy projects. And I suppose another fundamental point is how they acquired this stuff in the first place. I don't know, maybe did we give it them as a Christmas present one year and just forgot about it? Or I don't know, maybe they took it. Maybe that's how it happened. But I think it's fair to say that the Crown Estate particularly is a feudal relic, isn't it? So Kieran, from your perspective, what are the biggest issues in terms of the Crown Estate in Wales?
So I think you mentioned it right at the beginning there about the assets that the Crown Estate has in Wales. And I think getting an idea of the scale of those assets and the potential future scale of those assets is really significant. So I don't want to overwhelm people with figures, but just a couple to give us an idea of what we're talking about. So the latest estimates for all the Crown Estate assets in Wales was about 850 million, and 793 of that is offshore assets. So you can see that, proportionally there's a huge potential there. When we think about renewable energy, and one more figure, the total profits of the Crown Estate across Wales, England and Northern Ireland from the last financial year compared to the previous one more than doubled. So it's currently generating a profit of over £1 billion. And most of that increase is from something called options fees, which is where developers or companies who want to create offshore wind projects have to reserve a space on the seabed and they have to pay a fee for that. So about £600 million of profit in the last financial year was generated across Wales, England and Northern Ireland just from those options fees. And we've got £793 million worth of offshore Crown Estate assets in Wales. So there's, I think, a very clear link there between how much money we could generate going forward, particularly as, for a variety of reasons, renewable energy is becoming more and more important. I think we're on the cusp of a new industrial revolution almost. A green industrial revolution. And I think the time is ticking to utilise those assets. Yeah.
And it's become a very visible thing off our coastlines. And, personally, I welcome it. I think it's great that we've got these renewable energy streams come up. But you always got to ask the question, who benefits?
Yeah.
And we know from what you just said that it's Crown Estate benefiting. We know it's not Welsh communities because despite us being, is it the 5th largest exporter of electricity in the world, which is a stunning kind of stat when you think about it. So we export, twice as much electricity as we produce. And yet, Welsh communities, especially here in the north, have got the highest electricity prices in England and Wales. And that makes no sense. There's no balance there at all. It's once again, it's that extractive economy. We're the battery pack for the UK. We're producing all this stuff. We're seeing none of the benefits. And even at its most basic level, you should be seeing cheaper electricity prices. People are really struggling at the moment with cost of living, and they can see those wind farms, whether they're onshore or offshore, and we're not seeing any of the benefits. And that's the kind of democratic deficit I think we've really got to tackle. And I know, that's something we're keen to see happening. And of course, when we talk about transitioning to this green economy, there are some industries, such as steel, which are very energy intensive. So to attract those industries, you need reliable, cheap electricity. And for me, that is a huge bonus that we could say to people, look, we can provide this. We can have a base for an industrial manufacturing process which does need a lot of electricity. Therefore, we become very attractive. But at the moment, we're just feeding into this grid, which is privately owned, private profit, not community based. So we're losing both ways, I feel.
Definitely. I think now is a good point to raise the situation in Scotland, because the Crown Estate has been devolved to the Scottish Government since 2017. Looking at the figures for 2023-2024, the Crown Estate in Scotland generated a figure of £113.5 million. Now, there's a small part of that that's clawed back by Westminster because of the formula around the block grant, but it's relatively small, about 10 million. So it raised last year 103.5 million for the Scottish purse. And as Kieran was saying earlier on, this is big money. And if we transferred that hypothetically to a Welsh context, that sort of money would translate as 4.7 million for each local council area in Wales, as an example. And, as councillors, we're discussing the budget. I know council areas are having to look at cuts to services. That type of figure could make a massive difference. And the reason it's not happening is because, yet again, and we see this in other areas, not just in terms of the Crown Estate, we have this substandard devolution settlement. If it's good enough for Scotland, why isn't it good enough for Wales? There's no logical answer to this.
Yeah. We keep playing catch up, don't we? You keep, right from the start of devolution 25 years ago, we were given a certain amount of devolved sort of areas, where Scotland had everything but the ones that were kept centrally. So you've got to wonder, what have we done wrong? What have we done to upset people?
It is like a punishment, isn't it? And politically, this is a really interesting one, because Labour in Wales actually agree with Plaid Cymru that the Crown Estate should be devolved. The Lib Dems agree that it should be devolved. The Tories don't, but we're not particularly surprised about that. But this actually was brought up as an amendment by Plaid Cymru MPs in terms of the Crown Estate Bill really recently, where Plaid MPs called for the Crown Estate to be devolved to Wales, and it was blocked by Labour MPs in Westminster. And the Treasury Minister said there was greater benefit to Wales for the powers to stay with Westminster. He didn't quantify what those were. I don't think they were £103 million shaped, to be honest. But
they're echoing lines from Tory Treasury ministers, from the previous government, said exactly the same, that there's no sense in it staying or being devolved to Wales. And as you said, it's obviously HS2 arguments over again. You have to keep using mental gymnastics and tell some outright lies, to be honest, to say, well, of course it should be devolved to Scotland, but not to Wales. So, it's a ridiculous state of affairs in that sense, yeah.
There's no logic to this. And I remember taking part in a documentary with German TV randomly. They were really interested in this idea that profits generated in Wales were going to the royal family. And they wanted to film somewhere that showed one of these energy projects. So we ended up filming on a beach near Rhyl looking out at the Gwyntermore wind farm. And that's worth mentioning because these aren't small projects. That wind farm would power 400,000 houses. There are plans for a sister wind farm next to it, which would generate the same amount of power. That's most. It's over half, at least, of households in Wales that one project could power. And I remember when we were filming it, being stood on the beach, looking out at that project, when behind me was Rhyl. And I know, looking at some of the deprivation stats, that Rhyl West, for instance, is always up there in the top 10 as one of the most deprived communities in Wales. And it really made me quite angry, just that contradiction of looking out at that vast wealth in front of a community that's struggling with issues in terms of deprivation, and knowing that wealth was being extracted out for the royal family and for the UK Treasury. I mean, it was a real injustice. So to just say there's a greater benefit if powers stay with Westminster, I'm sorry, it's not going to wash, is it?
No, I think it's interesting now there is a head of steam in terms of local councils, whether they're paying for access to the foreshore or not. Local councils such as Wrexham have seen that it's in our interest to get this money directly. And it's really important. When you think about the black holes that lots of councils are facing, the fact that we've passed a motion now in Wrexham to say that we want devolution of the Crown Estate. That is a huge step forward, I think. Although we're not directly impacted with the foreshore, because we haven't got any sea in Wrexham, it's really, really important that Welsh councils stand together and that this momentum builds. So we demand it. It's not a case of
please
going with the begging bowl. It's we demanding this, and we should be the same with HS2. We demanding our fair share, because we're losing out and services are losing out. You mentioned Rhyl. There's plenty of places in Wrexham which are also struggling. Health services on its knees because we're not getting the funding that we actually need. So there's I think there is a head of steam building up.
Yeah,
I think I've been looking at the various councils one by one supporting motions, and what's been really interesting is the arguments put forward to devolve the Crown Estate to Wales. There's lots you can make. We've made some of them here already, but I've not heard any logical or factual argument against devolving it. So you mentioned a few minutes ago about some of the ministers in Westminster saying, "Oh, there's no benefit." But the only two lines, and the Labour minister currently in the Treasury has given this, the Conservative minister in the previous government in the Treasury, both said the same thing, that one, it'd essentially be a bit of an admin pain. So to establish a new body to devolve the Crown Estate to Wales, which is hardly a basis for not doing something. And then the second one, which really, really annoys me, is it would disrupt markets. There's no
which markets?
Which one?
Exactly, yeah. There's no explanation of what markets. I think really all they mean there is that, well, there's currently plans in place or projects in development to extract this value from the Crown Estate. It would come to Westminster, and by devolving it would disrupt that. It wouldn't go to Westminster. That's all they mean, I think, is that money would be disrupted. It wouldn't come to Westminster. It would stay where it's generated.
So, I mean, it's not an issue that's going to go away. We know that the majority of Welsh people support the Crown Estate being devolved. We've seen that in polling. We know the majority of Welsh councils support this being devolved. There are going to be more amendments put up to the Crown Estate Bill in Westminster. We'll see whether Labour actually do what they say they're going to do in Wales and stand up for us, or whether they're going to block it again. And it's going to be debated in the Senedd, but this is one we're going to keep coming back to, because it's not nice to have. This is just a simple case of unfairness, and it needs to be remedied, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
I call Llyn Medi to move new clause 1.
I beg to move new clause 1, which is tabled in my name. This amendment would transfer the management of the Crown Estate to the Welsh Government within 2 years after the commencement of the Act. The principle behind this amendment is a simple one, that the people of Wales should control and benefit from their own natural resources. For much of Welsh history, this has not been the case, with resources often exploited for the benefits of others. From copper in Amlwch and Ynys Môn, slate in Gwynedd, steel in Port Talbot and Newport, to the coal across South East Valleys. The rivers of wealth which have flowed from these industries were sucked out of our communities, and those communities have since been ravaged by poverty. Wales is blessed with natural wealth and brilliant people, yet we are also a nation afflicted with deprivation following years of extraction. Shocking new figures show that child poverty in Wales is set to reach 34.4% by the end of this decade. This is the legacy from our past. A past where wealth was generated was not used to benefit the Welsh economy or communities. Today, in 2025, this extractive pattern is being repeated with Wales's green wealth. Wales has an immense renewable energy potential in our windy seas and long coastlines. We can see this demonstrated in the Morlais project on Ynys Môn. But this seabed, along with thousands of acres of land, is controlled by the Crown Estate. Renewable energy projects using these resources are expanding rapidly and delivering profits. We see this in the value of the Crown Estate, which has skyrocketed from 96 million 5 years ago to £853 million in 2023. However, all profits generated by the Crown Estate in Wales is transferred to the Treasury. This green wealth, just like from the coal and other minerals in the past, is being sucked out of our nation. Millions of pounds generated on the Welsh Crown Estate is taken out of Wales each year, away from our communities who have borne the brunt of decades of economic decline. In 2017, Scotland gained control over the Scottish Crown Estate and ensured that all profit is kept in Scotland. Devolution has generated millions for the Scottish public purse, with funds going directly to those deprived communities, such as those in the Highlands. Why do the Scottish people get the benefits from their own water, wind and sea resources, but the people of Wales can't? It is simply not credible for the government to continue to say devolution is too complicated, too costly and too time-consuming. These are all issues which can be addressed with proper planning and resourcing. Scotland's Crown Estate was devolved in 2017. It is ludicrous to say the Welsh Crown Estates cannot be devolved in a similar way. In Scotland, interim measures were put in place to ensure a smooth transition from the point of devolution until the implementation of a long-term framework for the managing of assets. The amendment I have tabled takes a similar pragmatic approach by introducing a transition period. It worked in Scotland, it can work for Wales too. Throughout this whole debate, the government has still not addressed the principle of control. So I would like the Minister to answer directly. Does his government believe that the people of Wales should have democratic control over their own natural resources? The people of Wales certainly believe so. Polling shows majority support for devolution of the Crown Estate amongst the Welsh public is higher than ever. It's also supported by the Welsh Labour government, and the majority of councils in Wales have passed motions in support of devolution, with Wrexham Council doing just so last week, with support of the council's Labour group. More councils will follow suit, and we may very likely have all councils in Wales declaring support for devolution in the near future. There is a mandate from the right across Welsh society for devolution. Members of Parliament would do well to remember that they are here to serve and represent the people, and the people of Wales have clearly made their voice known on this matter. So in closing, I return to the principle which I outlined at the beginning of my speech. Do members of this House believe that the people of Wales, who after centuries of exploitation should finally be given the right to control and benefit from their own natural resources? If you believe in this principle, then I urge members to join me in the voting lobby. Yeah.
First, I thank the Honourable Member for Ynys Môn for tabling new Clause 1, which would require that within 2 years of the day on which the Act commences, the Treasury must have completed a transfer of the responsibility of the management of the Crown Estate in Wales to the Welsh Government. It would allow the Treasury, by regulations, to make provision about the transfer relating to reserved matters as necessary, and would require it to make provision to ensure that the employment of any person in Crown employment is not adversely affected by the transfer of responsibility. I also thank the Honourable Member for South Cambridgeshire for tabling new Clause 4, which her colleague also spoke to. This would require the Treasury to set out a scheme to transfer all existing Welsh functions of the Crown Estate Commissioners to Welsh ministers or a person nominated by Welsh ministers. The Welsh functions would consist of the property, rights or interests in land in Wales and rights in relation to the Welsh zone. Madam Deputy Speaker, as I set out at the committee stage, the Government believes there is greater benefit for the people of Wales and the wider United Kingdom in retaining the Crown Estate's current form. The new clause would most likely require the creation of a new entity to take on the management of the Crown Estate in Wales, which, by definition, would not benefit from the Crown Estate's current substantial capability, capital and systems abilities. It would further fragment the UK energy market by adding an additional entity, and as a consequence, it would risk damaging international investor confidence in UK renewables. It would also risk disrupting the National Energy System Operator's grid connectivity reform, which is taking a whole systems approach to the planning of generation and network infrastructure. These reforms aim to create a more efficient system and reduce the waiting times for generation projects to connect to the grid. Yeah.
I'm grateful to the Minister for outlining some of his concerns about the possibility of devolving Crown Estate to the Welsh Government. He's listed a number of concerns there. Am I right in following then that he believes that the devolution of the powers of the Crown Estate to Scotland have fragmented the market and are in some way to the disbenefit of the people of Scotland?
Well, I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his intervention, but the matter we're considering today as a result of the two new clauses I've identified is the proposal put forward by opposition parties to have a devolution with respect to Wales. We're not historically analysing what may have happened in Scotland. We're looking at the proposals put forward to us in terms of the new clauses I'm currently addressing. And to be clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, the cumulative impact of the changes that the Honourable Member for Ynys Môn is suggesting in her new clause would likely significantly delay the pathway to net zero. I'll give way.
Well, the Minister said that this would be beneficial to the people of Wales as it stands. Could he quantify that, please?
Well, I thank the Honourable Member for her intervention, and if she will wait just one moment, I'm going to address some of the direct benefits to the people of Wales of retaining the Crown Estate in its current form. So I'll come to that in a few moments. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's important to emphasise that the Crown Estate's marine investments are currently made on a portfolio-wide basis across England and Wales, and to devolve to Wales would disrupt the existing investments, since they would need to be restructured to accommodate a Welsh-specific entity. To devolve the Crown Estate at this time would risk jeopardising the existing pipeline of offshore wind development in the Celtic Sea planned into the 2030s. The Crown Estate's offshore wind leasing round 5 is spread across the English and Welsh administrative boundaries in the Celtic Sea. It was launched in February last year and is expected to contribute 4.5 gigawatts of total energy capacity, or enough to power 4 million homes. In addition to energy, the extensive jobs and supply chain benefits of Round 5 will also likely deliver significant benefits for Wales and indeed the wider United Kingdom. Lumen, an advisory firm to the Crown Estate, has estimated that manufacturing, transporting and assembling the wind farms could potentially create around 5,300 jobs and create a £1.4 billion boost for the UK economy. Devolution would also delay UK-wide grid connectivity reform. The Crown Estate is using its data and expertise as managers of the seabed to feed into the National Energy System Operator's new Strategic Spatial Energy Plan. For Wales, the Crown Estate is working in partnership with the Energy System Operator to ensure that its current pipeline of Welsh projects, the biggest of which is the Round 5 offshore wind opportunity in the Celtic Sea, can benefit from this coordinated approach to grid connectivity up front. It was simply not... I'll give way.
If devolution presents such enormous barriers, then why is the government choosing to put the headquarters of Great British Energy in Scotland?
Well, GB Energy, Madam Deputy Speaker, is for the benefit of the whole of the UK, and it's absolutely right to locate the headquarters in Aberdeen, given the strong connection between Aberdeen and using the assets of the North Sea to generate power for the entire United Kingdom. In fact, that is an example which underlines my point, I think, which is that having different parts of the United Kingdom working together, we can achieve more than we can separately. So I thank the honourable gentleman for endorsing my point there. Madam Deputy Speaker, it would not make commercial sense to introduce a new entity with control of assets only within Wales into a complex operating environment where partnerships have already been formed. Furthermore, the Crown Estate's assets and interests in Wales, as compared with its assets in England, are of a fundamentally smaller magnitude, which would likely not be commercially viable if the costs were unsupported by the wider Crown Estate portfolio. The Crown Estate in its present form can take a longer-term approach to its investments and spread the costs of those investments across its entire portfolio. A self-contained single entity in Wales would not have the same ability, nor would it benefit from the expertise that the Crown has developed over decades of delivering offshore wind at scale. A devolved entity will be starting from scratch. Midway through, I will give way.
The Minister has just told the House that Wales is too small and too poor to benefit from the devolution of the Crown Estate. That is an extraordinary argument, and I'm sure that Welsh Government will share my amazement. I wonder, has he discussed that with his partners in Welsh Labour?
Well, I think the honourable member has misunderstood the point I was making, but I would reply to her by saying that, if we were to have a devolved entity, Madam Deputy Speaker, it would be starting from scratch, midway through a multi-million-pound commercial tendering process, just at a time when the Crown Estate is undertaking critical investment in the UK's path toward net zero, something I'm sure she would be keen to support. For example, Madam Deputy Speaker, the commercial viability of all three 1.5 gigawatts floating offshore wind project development areas in the Celtic Sea, which straddle the English and Welsh administrative boundaries, benefited from the Crown Estate's significant investment of time, expertise and capital to enable entry into the market. UK floating offshore wind, which is an emerging technology that the Crown Estate is supporting, would be particularly vulnerable to market disruption. It is also important to underline that income generated by the whole Crown Estate benefits the people of Wales. As I have noted, the Crown Estate pays its entire net profits into the UK Consolidated Fund each year. This means that much of the revenues already support public services in Wales, either through supporting the UK Government spending in reserved areas or through funding provided under the operation of the Barnett Formula and the Welsh Government's block grant funding. I'll give way one more time.
As I mentioned in the Bill Committee, the Barnett Formula isn't a fair formula for Wales, but also in the Scottish model, we know that £10 million was taken out of the block grant, but they still received £103 million to put back in those communities. I think that's a fair exchange. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, the honourable member opposite has highlighted that the changes made in Scotland actually led to a reduction in the block grant going to Scotland. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, the focus of the new clauses we are debating today is around the proposal which opposition parties have put forward for devolving current Crown Estate capabilities to Wales. And as I'm setting out in my remarks today, this would not make commercial sense in terms of advancing the interests of greater energy capacity, and it would not make sense in terms of increasing the net profit made by the Crown Estate, which is, of course, reinvested into public services right across the country, right across Wales and other parts of the UK. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, to bring the debate on these new clauses to a close, I'd like to draw members' attention to the fact that the Government supported the inclusion of Clause 6 into the bill in the other place, which requires the appointment of commissioners responsible for giving advice about England, Wales and Northern Ireland. This will ensure that the Crown Estate's Board of Commissioners continue to benefit the work in the best interests of Wales.